If UFOs weren't manifesting, I'd be looking at what was manifesting. Is this a feint? No. The UFO phenomenon is burgeoning. It's not going away. The number of sightings in the UK last year doubled from the year before. That should send signals to us that the thing is not going away. If we had 1 or 2 a year, I wouldn't be talking about this. We get between 300 and 600 a month that are reported to George Filer, who came on the record in the alien interviews. So the phenomenon is real, and when we start to look at all the different aspects, like you talked about, alien abductions, just the typical sightings, alien implants, crop circles, cattle mutilations, when we begin to look at what the whole aspect of this thing, it becomes very sobering and really unnerving in my estimation, that, in my opinion, that what is coming here will be, in the words of Ricky Sorrell, overwhelming. So that's what, Sorrell saw the thing. Whitney White-Ashley, who came on the record, she's a reporter in and around the Stevensville area, and was very interesting. It's very candid. She talked about the fact that many of the people in and around Stevensville, very reticent to come on the record, didn't want to come on the record. They were afraid of being ridiculed. They're afraid of perhaps losing their job, being ostracized by their friends, all those dynamics that people who have sightings have to deal with. If you remember a few years ago when Travis Walton was allegedly abducted, I mean, this guy's life, and this is like well over a decade ago. We're in a different era now. We're in the era that I borrow Mikhail Gorbachev's word, perestroika and glasnost. I mean, that's what we are. There's more of an openness where the media is beginning to talk about it. Well, when Travis Walton was abducted, I mean, he had a media storm at his ranch. People thought he was a kook. I mean, his life was literally turned upside down. Just dreadful. Now it's a lot different. So, that's what... well,
it's a good point. We were watching Fox News, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. In the morning, on the morning show there, they had Nick Pope, who was the former Ministry of Defense official from the UK.
I saw the clip, right.
Right, to talk about what was going on. And while they kind of poo-pooed the idea and seemed to take kind of a tongue-in-cheek attitude toward the idea of UFOs, the fact that Fox News put this guy on to discuss his findings and to discuss the UFO sightings in the UK, I think was significant. One thing I'm curious about regarding the Stephenville sightings, no question that Texas is heart of the Bible Belt, especially when you get into rural Texas. So my guess is that if not Ricky Sorrell, then others who saw these craft were good church-going folk. I mean, the odds are just in favor that that's the case.
And Sorrell's was, yeah.
Okay, and how did they respond to this? Were they able to fit this into their worldview as professing Christians?
Here's when the phenomena started. I called literally. I went online. Churches in Stevensville. That's what I Googled. Stevensville, churches. I called at least a dozen churches in the area. Told them I would come, basically for free. Pay my way. I'll come for free. I've written 3 books on the subject, actually 4 books. Politics Prophecy was out at the time. I've researched this stuff for almost 3 decades. This is what's going on. Not one taker. Not one taker. No one's interested. No one's interested.
So the pastors didn't want to touch the topic?
Nope.
And is it safe to guess then that if the pastors aren't talking about it and how to fit it into a Christian paradigm, that their congregations probably can't either?
And this is what amazes me, is that the church is like a frog. We've all heard the analogy of being slowly boiled to death in water, It's not aware that the temperature's increasing as he just sits there and relaxes in the hot water. That's unfortunately where the churches are for the most part. For instance, I ran into a friend that I used to go to, we fellowship at the same church at one point in time. And I hadn't seen this guy in about 4 years. He's at the market. And he goes, "Hey, Lynn, what you working on?" I go, "Oh, working on a new book." And he goes, "What's it called?" I go, "It's called The Alien Interviews," right? The guy literally took a step back from me, literally stepped back and looked around for how do I get out of here? I mean,
we've had that happen to us too. Yeah, we've had that happen to us too. No, we've had that happen to us too. We talked with a former, fellow that we went to church with in St. Louis for a while, and we tried to describe what we were doing with PID radio, and he laughed, and then he realized we weren't joking. So
yeah,
same
exactly.
kind of reaction. Yeah,
and this is the problem. I mean, the church plays church. We go, the Grand Poobah stands up there. We listen for 45 minutes. We stare at the person's head in front of us. For the most part, we walk out of there We don't remember anything that was said. We pay to play. The worship team, leads us in a few songs, and that's it. Mm-hmm. And there's no direct connection with the supernatural. Look, I feel like Luther in some ways. We didn't go far enough here. We are just a couple of steps away from Catholicism, and we're way off topic here, but this is it's not first century Christianity. And for the most part, the church doesn't move in the things of the Spirit. So the things of the Spirit have really died from most churches in this country, which is why in Europe the churches are all dead. And people turn to paganism and they turn to Wicca. And the same thing is happening here. Google paranormal radio and watch how many hits come up.
Oh, absolutely.
Half a million hits. Mm-hmm. Why? Because people are hungry for the supernatural. That book, that Bible that I cherish and believe in with all my heart is a supernatural guidebook. That's what it is. It tells us how to interface with the supernatural. It tells us the gifts of the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. It tells us the differentiation between the things of the flesh and the things of the Spirit. It gives us a window into the heavenlies and how it operates. Not exhaustively, but at least gives us an idea of what to do. We know when angels show up, what happened to men. We know when demons show up, what happened to men and how we can exorcise them. Fair and fasting, right from the Master's mouth himself. It's a guidebook to the supernatural. We see that things are moved by faith and not by might. All these things, and these are there. These events really happened. It's not just a bunch of words on a paper. When Jesus, after his resurrection, and he comes through the wall, which sounds a lot like an alien abduction scenario to me. We can get into that later. He's operating under some power and manipulating physics in ways that we don't even understand, which I'm getting way ahead of myself. But, the apostles look at him and they freak out. They go, oh, my gosh, it's a ghost. No, handle me, touch me. So after he's got them calmed down, the first issue on business, he gets them all calmed down. And then it's a total guy thing. He goes, hey, you guys got anything to eat? Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable. Yeah. And they sit down and they eat. That is just hilarious when we look at that. It's absolutely hilarious. When you tell it that way, people start laughing because it's a total guy thing. Hey, you got anything to eat, guys? Let's sit down. But what's interesting is when we hear that story, one man is droning away from the pulpit. Stained glass windows surround us. We're in some sort of a reverential building in a reverential setting. We miss the supernatural is completely taken out of it. It becomes this dogmatic, ritualistic, religious thing, which it's never supposed to be intended that way. It's a document of what happened, but it's also an insight into the supernatural. Jesus is manifesting in front of his disciples. And are we looking at the same sort of similarities today, specifically in the abduction phenomena, when the grays float the abductees through windows and through walls? Well, are they from the same place?
Well, that's what I want to establish. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, Lynn, but that's what a point that I want to connect here. To two data points I want to connect very clearly. How you fit the alien interviews into that biblical supernatural paradigm that you described. What about the worldview, your worldview, that's been shaped by the literal resurrection and return of Jesus Christ to his disciples prompts you to go out and talk to people who say that they've seen UFOs and been abducted by aliens? How does that fit together?
Well, it's really interesting, and the reason why it fits together is this, and it'll take a minute to explain. There's an artifact, and this isn't the only artifact that we can use, but let me back up. There's an artifact I want to talk about, specifically the Shroud of Turin, I use that to make a point, but it's not the only way I can make the point, and I'll demonstrate it from two different points of view, so to speak, but arriving at the same conclusion. When we look at the Shroud of Turin, we realize that and I'm going to jump ahead of all the skeptics thing. First of all, it's not painted. There's no directionality within the shroud. There's no brushstrokes going a certain way. There's no pigment on the shroud. They're not sure how it got there. When you take a fibril, which is the smallest part of the piece of linen which makes up the shroud, the image abruptly ends, and as it goes off the side of the fibril, it ends at a 90-degree angle. So it's not paint. It's anatomically perfect. There's no work of art on the planet that is anatomically perfect. Okay, the Shroud of Turin, the carbon dating that was done on that was flawed because they took the sample from a 15th century patch job from a fire that was done with end